Good morning, I'm Robert Tan. Join us as we follow the money from the financial choices that shape our daily life to the bigger forces driving the economy. The headlines. It's a big day today. The Senate convenes as an impeachment court for the trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. A fuel price hike is expected this week, with diesel likely to go up by 2.5 pesos per liter. Plus, how does political instability affect the economy and the everyday Filipino? Ibon Foundation Executive Director Sonny Africa joins us. The impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte reaches its next stage today. At 3 in the afternoon, the Senate will convene as an impeachment court for Duterte's trial. House prosecutors are preparing their case while expressing hope that Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano will ensure proper conduct of the proceedings.
Ang pinagbabatayan po natin ng kumpiyansa ay yung pagtitiwala po natin sa atin pong Senate President sa kanya pong pronouncement kasama ng Senate leadership at the majority that firstly, that they will convene the Senate Impeachment Court at 3 p.m. and that secondly, that the Senate majority will not object to the convening of the impeachment court.
A two-thirds vote or 16 senators is required to convict Duterte. In other news, the peso remains under pressure, hovering near Friday's all-time low. This morning, the local currency opened at 61.69, stronger than Friday's close of 61.72. But the peso plunged 61.75 in intraday trading. Economist Emmanuel Leco said the weakening of the peso can be partly attributed to the ongoing political turmoil.
While nobody can say that it's 50%, but definitely it's a major trigger for many of our investors to get out of the peso asset and move into more stable assets in other markets. So definitely what happened last Monday or the other day at the Senate was a major factor. This is the first time that shots were heard in the Senate. Shooting in the Senate is a major issue here. It's a development that nobody wanted to see.
A fuel price hike is expected this week. Based on projections, prices of diesel may increase by up to 2.5 pesos per liter and gasoline by more than 1 peso per liter. This as the fate of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire remains uncertain. To add fuel to the fire, U.S. President Donald Trump warned the clock is ticking for Iran. He said, quote, "There won't be anything left of them if Iranian leaders do not act fast." Peace efforts between Washington and Tehran have stalled, with neither side willing to budge. Meanwhile, the U.S. has reportedly outlined conditions after Iran responded to their latest peace proposal. According to Iranian media, Washington refuses to pay war damages or unfreeze Iranian assets. It also wants Iran to transfer 400 kilograms of enriched uranium to the U.S. and operate only one nuclear facility. Economic uncertainty up next, and now political instability. Who pays the price? Ibon Foundation Executive Director Sonny Africa joins us. Keep following the money. Welcome back to Follow the Money. While the world watched U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping shake hands, the Philippines was putting out a different kind of fire. A senator fleeing an ICC arrest warrant, gunshots inside the upper chamber, a vice president impeached again, all in 1 week on top of power outages and weekend flooding. Political chaos has a price. Today, we find out who pays dearly for it. And joining us this morning is Sonny Africa, Executive Director of think tank Ibon Foundation. Good morning, Sonny. Welcome to Follow the Money.
Hi, good morning, Sir Robert. Thanks for the invitation. Hi.
Sonny, it's been a turbulent week politically, institutionally, even in terms of power supply and flooding. Now, GDP growth at a 5-year low of 2.8%, inflation at a 3-year high of 7.2%. Now, from where Ibon sits, what is the real economic read right now?
Well, well, like I said, an economy that can keep prices down, keep the lights on, or even keep floodwaters out, it really isn't stable. So I think the last weekend just, shows that the Philippines is facing this weird convergence of a lot of long-standing structural problems combined with doubtless escalating political instability. And of course, Ibon's main concern always is that ordinary Filipinos, I mean, the low growth, high inflation combination will be super dangerous for ordinary Filipinos because they'll be squeezed from both sides. While the cost of living is going to keep rising, their incomes will keep stagnating. So again, I think it's good to be to be alarmed by how things have been developing the last weeks. But from where Ibon sits, I think it's not just a bad quarter. It's the result of decades of neglect of agriculture, manufacturing. It's actually being thrown in our face right now. The government, the economy can't rely on consumption, remittances, debt-driven spending, and imports to keep the growth numbers alive.
Now, Sonny, the government says the fundamentals are sound, but you've argued the headline numbers hide a deeper structural decay. Growth is slowing, inflation is rising, and foreign buyers have already postponed trips to Manila this week. Now, how much of that is policy failure and how much is just bad luck?
Oh, well, threw me off. You can call maybe one storm bad luck, but when every storm, every typhoon that comes a disaster, I think that's a policy failure. I mean, no doubt there are currently external pressures, global oil shocks, geopolitical tensions, slowing world trade, but those have always been there and will always be there. So I think countries' economic policy, our government, should be judged not whether what they do with the shock that comes in, but how resilient they are to shocks that will always come in. And unfortunately, the Philippines is really unusually vulnerable because the policy for the last 4-5 decades has been toward systematically weakening those real fundamentals, which is domestic production. I mean, when you liberalize agriculture instead of modernizing it, that makes food more expensive, makes us more import dependent. If you open up manufacturing instead of strategically developing it, that actually weakens job creation, weakens our productive capacity. When energy is privatized without real public control, it's going to shoot up again for a whole host of reasons. When infrastructure spending, it prioritizes port-barrel projects and real estate expansion over industrial logistics, mass transport, or even basics like irrigation and flood control. When political turmoil erupts, when the shocks come, the economy will be shaken much more easily because, that kind of economic policy framework has weakened our foundations.
Yeah. Now, there are many different opinions with regards to government's either action or inaction with regards to the different issues that we are experiencing today. We've seen billions in public funds frozen, sitting officials named, a Senate report pending, and prosecution still pending.
Yeah.
Small business owners are still cleaning up after every typhoon season because the flood walls were never built. Now, what does that level of delayed accountability cost to ordinary Filipinos and businesses?
I know how for a lot of Filipinos, accountability, impeachment seems very abstract, but I think what should be driven home is that delaying accountability really does have very concrete economic costs. The impeachment of VP Sara right now, I think, matters greatly. It's not just a legal or political issue. Letting the country's highest public officials misuse public funds with impunity is a failure of governance that directly worsens the living conditions of literally tens of millions of Filipinos. I mean, we know, it's already well known how corruption diverts resources away from social services, development priorities, and all that. But I think more and more Filipinos should realize we should also be concerned, corrupt officials who abuse public trust aren't really the kind of leaders we can trust to govern with the welfare of ordinary Filipinos in mind. And I think what we're seeing today, the last couple of weeks, amid over 21 million poor and vulnerable Filipinos undergoing economic hardship, I think it should be revealing to a lot of people the quality of our governance. Instead of addressing this immediate problem with urgency, the Marcos administration, the senators on both sides of the Marcos Duterte divide, they're locked in political squabbling, looking more at 2028 than today. And I think,
The current
in the
situation
end,
we're in, yes.
yeah, and that's why for us, the impeachment tell right now, of course, we didn't get the impeachment of President Marcos, so there's some things to be explained there. But our bottom line, accountability, it's an absolutely essential element to ensure that government resources and government authority and policy are used to protect the public, not just to preserve, elite power, wealth, and privilege. And I think what we're seeing right now is that who is that power for? Who is this? Who are these government resources being used for?
Yes.
Clearly, not for the majority.
Now, going back to what happened next week and last week and over the weekend.
Yeah.
Now, when institutions make international headlines for the wrong reasons and the government's response to the 21 million poor families absorbing the oil shocks has barely scratched the surface, how
Yeah.
does that affect the everyday economic life of the Filipino worker and the small entrepreneurs?
Well, I think top of mind there's entertainment value, but bottom line there is entertainment value, so to some degree there's some sort of weird distraction from daily troubles and hardships. But the bottom line, structurally, institutionally, when elites squabble, ordinary Filipinos still have to pay for their marketing, for their groceries. Filipinos have to pay for the electricity, for the fuel bill. I mean, bottom line, all this squabbling, that is entertaining. I think that's an effect that we look for entertainment where we can. But the bottom line, it's workers and small entrepreneurs who face a problem of instability and maybe even power shortages. Transport operators now, the drivers, they're all facing rising fuel prices. Informal workers don't have jobs.
Yeah.
Families are spending more of their income on food. I think bottom line, entertainment value, I don't think it's entertaining over the long term when political instability really is about weakening the government's capacity to deal with high food prices, public transport, low wages, affordability of energy, and are instead preoccupied with factional conflict. And I think, international headlines will, portray all this as dysfunction. But again, the dysfunction should be seen most of all from the point of view of ordinary Filipinos, because they're the ones who bear the burden of basically our structural problems and even the elite squabbling.
Now, looking at the sectors that are affected by the ongoing issues locally and geopolitically, like manufacturing, having a smallest share of GDP in 77 years, agriculture is at a historic low, informal, unstable work dominating employment. Now, what needs to happen? Is this economy producing what Filipinos actually need right now?
I think production is always misconstrued as just what's there to be bought. Bottom line, our basic problem is that the economy has been growing without industrializing, and the Filipinos have been consuming without producing. Because the economy shouldn't just produce goods and services. The economy should produce decent jobs, fair incomes for people. And I think the crisis didn't just begin this week, certainly not over the weekend. It didn't just start, with the flood control scandals last year. The political turbulence since last year really just exposes a really much deeper and older economic problem. The collapse of manufacturing you mentioned means, of course, the Philippines isn't producing enough high-value goods, meaning we don't have the capacity to produce, but also don't have the capacity to produce the jobs producing those goods. Agriculture's decline, smallest in history as share of GDP, means higher food prices and food insecurity. Putting manufacturing and agriculture's decline together, the labor market would always just generate informal, low-paid, precarious work because the main anchors for productive employment, manufacturing and agriculture, have been deteriorated. So what we have right now, a long-term dependence on overseas remittances, even BPOs, debt imports, even real estate expansion, they actually they've delivered growth, no doubt. They've delivered consumption capacity to consume, but they haven't delivered strong domestic productive capacity, which is what would give a higher capacity to consume and also strengthen the foundations for the future. Bottom line, our model, so it's been dead for so long, but the growth they've been generating for so long to cover up for the zombie nature, I think even that actually has fallen apart right now.
Now, Sonny, this year should have been, the Philippines should have been in the spotlight with the Philippines being ASEAN chair this year. The Balikatan just wrapped with the U.S. and Japanese forces, but still a lot of issues. The South China Sea remains unsettled, a lot of issues happening geopolitically. Now, for ordinary Filipinos and the small business owners again, is this moment an opportunity or a distraction from the real economic problems at home? And what should be done if for the individuals and the businesses working right now while waiting for things to ease up, what can they do to help themselves?
Yeah, I think that, of course, the geopolitical moment right now, it seems like we're facing a cusp here of the shift from the unipolar world dominated by the US to a bipolar world with China, and then possibly a multipolar world where other countries assert themselves. I think the biggest failing right now is that there are opportunities created, but the Philippines doesn't have that coherent national development and especially national industrialization strategy to navigate that moment. So you really can't, geopolitically posture your way out of economic backwardness. Yeah, we have all the pictures, we have all the visits maybe of world leaders. You might even have the president hobnobbing with, heads of state of China and the US. But bottom line, without that coherent national development strategy to navigate, again, the geopolitical turbulence, the country will just become a strategic location for the bigger powers. And this is a problem, whatever large power you're talking about, whether giving up the country as a military base for the United States through the Balikatan exercises, deployment of missiles, creating the defense industrial base with the PAC Silica and Zone Economic Corridor. That is actually just being glorifying our strategic location for the U.S. interest in the Indo-Pacific strategy. But at the same time, we don't actually want the same thing either with China. And the only way to actually have a metric for assessing will this improve the condition for ordinary Filipinos? Will food prices fall? Will jobs be created? Will wages rise? Will electricity become affordable? That needs a coherent plan for industrialization, technological upgrading, real domestic food security. And then the geopolitical alignment has to align with that strategy. And without that strategy, the geopolitical alignment means that we're sort of subsuming ourselves to the priorities of large powers. And then,
do you see us moving towards that direction that you're saying, Sonny, like we have to move forward strategically?
Clearly, we're not. I mean, if you look at the press releases of the Philippines, for instance, about the PAC Silica initiative, we're parroting what the U.S. State Department is saying. I don't think any big power, not just China or the U.S., would do something that is not in their big power interest. So it's very odd for us to see the Philippine government, the economic managers, the defense secretary, parroting press releases of the U.S. State Department about the so-called benefits of PAC Silica. I mean, of course, the U.S. will say, hey guys, be a defense industrial base for us. This is great for you. But it's missing out two things. The Philippines has been an investor destination for manufacturing, including U.S. manufacturing and its subcontractors for decades. But manufacturing has fallen to its smallest share in 80 years. Of course, the U.S. will say, they'll dazzle us with AI and, semiconductors. But those aren't Filipino AI firms. Those aren't Filipino semiconductor firms. I think, again, if you're just going to be parroting what a big power says we will get from it, I think that says a lot about our inability to view a world, to have a vision of development, especially economic progress, not linked to a big power relationship, which has worked so hard, so bad against us all these decades.
Now, finally, Sonny, for a Filipino worker watching right now, small businesses watching, minimum wage earners, triple-digit fuel prices, power outages, a small business owner flooding every typhoon season because the walls were never built. Now, let's follow the money. Where does it go in this country, and does it ever find its way back to them?
I think your great name of the show, Follow the Money. Clearly in the Philippines now, through this crisis and for decades, the money flows upward so quickly, but it's really suffering that flows downward even faster. I mean, there's no doubt tens of millions of Filipinos work hard enough to give something to their families, that is a contribution to building the so-called high-growth, prosperous economy we have. The thing is, the structure of the economy channels wealth upward into monopolies, financial elites, political dynasties, and foreign corporations, while ordinary workers get left behind absorbing the risks. We think that there should be a problem with that kind of same backward economy producing billionaires even during crises. The central issue isn't scarcity, it's distribution, priorities, and power.
But you're still optimistically hopeful. You mentioned that before the show.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I think the real question isn't whether the Philippines has enough resources to develop. It's about who controls the resources, who benefits from economic policy, and whether this policy will finally be organized around social need instead of elite wealth and accumulation. And I think every step towards a more democratic politics is a step forward to a more democratic economy. And I think a step forward to more Filipinos, the majority of Filipinos, having better lives today and in the decades
Definitely. On that note, Sonny, thank you very much for joining us this morning for your insights. And I'm glad that you're hopefully optimistic about what's going to happen in the next coming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
And that's all for today. I'm Robert Tan. Every day we'll help you make sense of the financial choices and economic forces that shape everyday life. Thank you for watching. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel, and always follow the money.